I had waited my whole life for this moment. Years of working double shifts, saving every dollar, and living modestly while everyone else seemed to enjoy luxuries I could only dream about. And then, finally, it happened. I bought it. My own oceanfront villa. Not just a house, a $2 million dream carved into the edge of the sea. Every morning the sun spilled golden light across the waves, and I would sip my coffee on the balcony, breathing in freedom. For the first time in decades, I felt peace. No one telling me what to do, no one depending on me, no noise. Just me, the ocean, and a life I had built with my own two hands. But peace never lasts, does it? Especially in families where respect has long been forgotten. My quiet paradise was shattered with a single phone call. It was my son-in-law. His voice, sharp and commanding, rang through the line. "We're on our way. 15 of us. Beds, towels, slippers, food. We'll be there in 40 minutes, so hurry up, old man." I froze. My hand trembled as I held the phone. He wasn't asking. He was ordering me, as if my $2 million villa was nothing more than his vacation rental. And in that moment, I had a choice. Surrender my peace, or smile, stay silent, and make a plan they would never forget. The phone rang just as I was settling into the rhythm of my new life. The sun had climbed high, pouring its golden warmth across the balcony of my villa. I remember I had just set a tray down on the table, a simple breakfast, fresh fruit, and coffee so strong you could almost taste the years of sacrifice that had gone into every sip. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, my reward, my peace. I reached for the phone without thinking, smiling faintly, expecting maybe a neighbor or an old friend curious about my move to the coast. But the moment I lifted the receiver, that smile froze on my face. Because it wasn't a friend. It was my son-in-law. His voice cut through the line like a blade, loud, arrogant, and dripping with entitlement. Not a hello, not a how are you? No warmth, just demands. We're on our way with 15 people, prepare everything. We'll stay for 3 weeks. I sat back in my chair, the words echoing in my ears, bouncing around inside my chest until they stung like bullets. 15 people, 3 weeks, my villa. And then, as if his words weren't already enough to scorch through the peace I had carved out for myself, he added the insult that twisted deep into my heart. "Hurry up, old man." Old man. The way he said it, sharp, mocking, as though I was nothing more than a servant. As though the villa I had poured my life savings into was nothing but a cheap motel he had already paid for. I closed my eyes for a moment, gripping the phone tighter, trying to steady my breath. My son-in-law, speaking to me like this. A man who had married into my family. A man who had never lifted a finger to help me. A man who had mocked me in whispers and to my face when he thought he could get away with it. And now, here he was, claiming my villa as if it were his birthright. I wanted to scream. I wanted to unleash the storm that had been building inside me for years. Years of subtle insults, years of being dismissed, years of being treated like I was nothing more than an afterthought in my own family. But I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't even argue. Instead, I smiled. Because in that moment, something inside me shifted. I realized that anger, loud, fiery anger, would give him what he wanted. He wanted me rattled. He wanted me flustered, obedient, rushing to prepare for his grand arrival with his army of freeloaders. But I refused to give him the satisfaction. So I simply said nothing. On the other end of the line, he filled the silence with more commands, more insults. "Make sure the guest rooms are ready, 15 beds. Don't forget towels, slippers, food. We'll be there in 40 minutes, so don't just sit there doing nothing. Move, old man." Each word dripped with condescension, each syllable designed to cut me down and remind me of the hierarchy he had crafted in his own head. In his world, he was the master. I was the servant. He gave the orders, and I followed. But as I stood there, the phone pressed against my ear, I felt something different rising inside me. Not fear, not defeat, but a cold, steady fire. Silent rage. It started as a spark in the pit of my stomach, then spread upward, winding its way into my chest, settling firmly in my heart. The kind of rage that doesn't roar. It whispers. The kind of rage that doesn't crumble. It builds. I lowered the phone slowly, not bothering to respond. I didn't slam it down. I didn't curse. I just let him hang up, still barking orders, thinking he had won. And when the line went dead, the villa was silent again. But that silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was sharp, charged, filled with the hum of something dangerous. I walked across the polished floor of my villa, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the vast space. I looked out toward the ocean, its waves rolling steadily as though nothing had changed. The breeze drifted in through the open doors, brushing against my face like a reminder. This is yours. You fought for this. You bled for this. No one has the right to take it away. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel the insult fully. I let it burn. I let it sear into my chest. My son-in-law, a man who should have respected me, a man who should have seen me as family, had reduced me to nothing more than an old man, standing in the way of his free vacation. But anger, if left unchecked, destroys the one who holds it. And I had no intention of letting him destroy me. So I made a decision. I would not meet arrogance with anger. I would not meet insults with shouting. I would not fight fire with fire. Instead, I would plan. Slowly, patiently, quietly. Because while my son-in-law believed he had control, he didn't know who he was truly dealing with. He thought he was calling a tired, lonely, powerless old man, clinging to his villa like a lifeline. But he had no idea that the person on the other end of that line was far more dangerous when silent than when loud. I poured myself another cup of coffee, my hands steady now, the bitterness of the drink grounding me. I stared out at the horizon where the ocean kissed the sky, and I whispered to myself, "You have 40 minutes, my dear. 40 minutes to prepare everything. But not in the way he expects." The clock ticked on the wall. The breeze whispered against the curtains, and in the quiet of my villa, the seeds of my plan began to take root. I didn't rush to strip bed sheets or set out towels. I didn't scramble to stock the fridge with food or lay out slippers like a hotel clerk waiting for guests. No. I paced slowly through the villa, every step deliberate, every thought sharp and clear. My son-in-law's words replayed in my head. Prepare everything. 15 people, 3 weeks. Hurry up, old man. I repeated them to myself, not in despair but in defiance, because what he thought would crush me had in fact strengthened me. That phone call, that insult, was not the end of my peace. It was the beginning of my revenge. And so, as the clock ticked closer to his promised arrival, I let the silence stretch. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of power. Because sometimes the most dangerous plan begins with nothing more than a smile and the decision to wait. The moment I set the phone down, the villa fell into a silence so heavy it seemed to press against the walls. For a long while, I just stood there, frozen, listening to the echo of his voice in my mind. We're on our way with 15 people. Prepare everything. We'll stay for 3 weeks. Hurry up, old man. The arrogance in his tone still clung to me like smoke. I could almost hear his smugness through the dead phone line, his certainty that I would jump to obey. I didn't. Instead, I looked around at the villa, my villa, as if seeing it with new eyes. The sunlight shimmered on the marble floor. The ocean breeze slipped through the open balcony doors, carrying the salty scent of freedom. This house was not just a purchase. It was my victory. Every wall, every tile, every polished piece of wood was a reminder of years of sacrifice, of nights I went without so others could have more. And now, with 40 minutes on the clock, they were coming to strip it all away, turning my sanctuary into their playground. I began to pace. My slippers tapped softly against the cool stone floor as I walked the length of the living room. Step after step, back and forth, as though motion alone could keep me from unraveling. The clock ticked on the wall, each second slicing the silence into smaller and smaller pieces. Tick. With every passing beat, the reality pressed harder against me. 40 minutes. That was all the time I had before cars full of entitled voices, laughing and shouting, pulled into my driveway, before suitcases rolled across my floor, before my peace was shattered beyond repair. I pressed a hand against my chest. My heart was racing, too fast, too loud, pounding against my ribs as if it wanted to escape. I turned toward the balcony doors, letting the breeze brush against me, cool and steady, the opposite of the storm in my veins. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, its waves rolling in rhythm, steady, calm, indifferent to the chaos about to descend on my home. I whispered to myself, do I let them in? Or do I show them who really owns this house? The words hung in the air, carried away by the wind, but they stayed inside me, reverberating in the hollow spaces where fear wanted to take root. I walked into the guest rooms, one by one, glancing at the neatly made beds, the folded linens, the small touches I had added for visitors I actually wanted. The rooms smelled of lavender from the sachets tucked into drawers, the kind of detail born from love, not obligation. But the thought of my son-in-law and his horde of relatives tossing their luggage on these beds, demanding more, laughing as though they had conquered me, it made my blood heat. They thought I was weak. They thought I was passive. They thought I would surrender the very thing I had fought to earn. No, not this time. I returned to the living room, the ticking clock pulling me back into the moment. 35 minutes now, maybe less. My heart still pounded, but beneath it something else had begun to form, a quiet, deliberate strength. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I had signed the papers for this villa, my pen trembling as I realized I had finally made it. I traced my hand across the smooth wood, remembering how far I had come. And then I thought about how far I was willing to go to protect it. Memories flashed, moments when my son-in-law had belittled me at family dinners, when he had whispered to my daughter that I was losing it, when he had rolled his eyes at my opinions, dismissing me as though age had stripped me of wisdom. He had mistaken silence for weakness. But silence is a weapon if you know how to use it. I rose again, pacing once more, this time with purpose. Each step sharpened my thoughts, each breath steadied my resolve. I thought of the options laid before me. Do I let them in? Fill every room with their noise, their demands, their entitlement? Do I let them eat my food, dirty my linens, trample through my sanctuary until it feels less like my home and more like a prison? Or do I remind them, once and for all, who I am, who truly owns this house, who built this life from the ground up without anyone's help, least of all, his? The choice formed inside me with a clarity so sharp it felt like glass. I would not let them in. Not like this. Not under these terms. Not with disrespect as their only offering. But my revenge, it could not be wild or reckless. No, that would make me just like him. Shouting, arrogant, desperate for control. My revenge needed to be quiet, calculated, powerful. The kind of revenge that slips in like the tide, unseen until it is too late. I looked around the villa one more time, breathing deeply. The salty air, the steady crash of the waves, the ticking of the clock. Each sound became part of my plan. Each detail reminded me of the power I held, the peace I was not willing to surrender. I walked into the master bedroom, opened the wardrobe, and pulled out a small notebook. In its pages were the details of my ownership, my contracts, my lawyer's number scribbled in the margins. I ran my fingers over the ink, feeling the weight of proof in every line. This villa was mine. Not theirs, not his, not anyone else's. I whispered again, louder this time. Do I let them in? Or do I show them who really owns this house? And then I smiled. The decision was made. I would wait for them. I would open the door. I would let them see me, calm, steady, unshaken. And then, when the moment was right, I would show them the truth. Not through shouting, not through begging, but through action, through silence, through a plan so deliberate they would never see it coming. The clock ticked on. 20 minutes left. My heart still raced, but now it was no longer fear. It was anticipation. I walked back out to the balcony, letting the sunlight warm my face, listening to the endless whisper of the ocean. The waves rolled in, crashing against the shore, powerful and inevitable. And I realized something. That was me. Steady, patient, unstoppable. They thought they could come here and take over my life in 40 minutes. But in 40 minutes, they would learn that I was not a guest in my own story. I was the tide. And the tide never asks permission. The sound came first. Long before I saw the cars, I heard them. Engines roaring up the narrow road like an invading army, horns blaring as though they owned the very air. My villa sat high on the cliff, overlooking the ocean, but even from that distance, I could hear their voices. Loud, careless laughter, shouts overlapping, children crying, adults barking over one another. I stood by the window, hidden behind the curtain, and watched as the first car turned into the driveway. It wasn't one car, or two. It was a parade, SUVs, minivans, sedans packed to the brim. Doors flung open before the engines even stopped, and people spilled out onto the gravel like they were arriving at a resort. 15 of them, just like he had promised. I could see their suitcases tumbling out of trunks, their arms loaded with coolers, beach chairs, inflatable toys, all the signs of people who had come not for a visit, but for a takeover. They didn't pause to admire the villa. They didn't stop to knock politely at the door. No, they moved with the entitlement of people who believed this house was theirs. I pressed my lips together, my heart steady now, not racing like before. My decision had been made in the silence of that earlier hour, and now I was ready. I opened the front door just as they reached the steps. The noise grew louder, filling the air like a storm. They were laughing, shouting, waving at each other as if they were guests at a grand hotel. Not one pair of eyes met mine with respect. Not one voice said hello. Instead, my son-in-law stepped forward, dragging 2 oversized bags behind him. He didn't even look at me. He brushed past me, his shoulder nearly knocking against mine, and muttered over his shoulder, "Move, old man. We need the big rooms upstairs. Kids can take the guest rooms on the right. Kitchen better be stocked. We're starving." The words cut through me, sharp and cold, but I did not flinch. I simply smiled. Behind me, the villa echoed with the thud of heavy luggage hitting the floor, the shuffle of feet dragging across polished marble, the clatter of voices spilling into every corner. "Where's the Wi-Fi password?" someone shouted. "These rooms are too small," another complained. "Is there enough food? We'll need to go shopping." "Why are there only 6 chairs at the table? We're 15. Each voice layered on top of the other, rising, demanding, taking. I walked slowly to the side, letting them pour in like water through an open gate. Their energy was chaotic, frantic, thoughtless, the kind of noise that drowns out reason. And yet, through it all, I said nothing. I observed. I watched the way they opened cabinets without asking, pulling out plates and glasses as if they were already theirs. I watched them toss their bags onto beds without care, spreading clothes across chairs and tables. I watched my son-in-law stride into the kitchen, open the fridge, and shake his head in disgust. Empty, figures. Old man didn't even think ahead. "We'll make a list. You can run to the store." The insult slid past me like water over stone. I kept smiling, my silence thicker than any words I could have spoken. Because while they laughed and demanded, while they mocked and dismissed, they did not see the truth. My plan was already in motion. I drifted through the villa quietly, nodding here, stepping aside there, as though I were nothing more than a shadow in my own home. To them, I was invisible, the man they could command, the servant they assumed I was. But every step I took, every glance I gave, was deliberate. I noted where they left their bags. I watched how they sprawled across the couches, shoes still on, sandy from the drive. I saw which ones had already opened bottles of wine from the cabinet, drinking as though they had earned it. And through it all, my son-in-law barked orders. Kids upstairs, don't take the big room, that's ours. Set up the grill outside. We'll need that ready tonight. Someone call the pizza place. Old man, get your wallet, you're paying. Each command was thrown into the air like arrows, hitting me one after the other. Still, I smiled. My silence unnerved a few of them. I could see it in the way one of the women, his cousin, perhaps, glanced at me uncertainly. She whispered something to another, and they both laughed nervously, as if unsure whether I had heard. Oh, I had heard. I heard everything, but I gave them nothing in return, because my power lay not in what I said, but in what I chose not to say. As the chaos spread through my home, I slipped out onto the balcony. The sea stretched before me, vast and endless, its waves crashing with a steady rhythm that drowned out their noise. I let the wind whip against my face, cooling the fire inside me. Behind me, the villa had become unrecognizable. Luggage everywhere, voices clashing, demands rising. And yet, standing there, I felt no despair, only clarity. They thought they had won by arriving. They thought their presence was enough to claim victory. But they didn't know what I had already set into motion. The villa was mine. Every brick, every stone, every inch of land had my name on it. And beyond ownership, beyond papers and contracts, there was something greater they had overlooked. My resolve. I turned back into the chaos, smiling once again, because sometimes the loudest revenge is born in silence. And as they filled my home with arrogance and noise, I stood steady, waiting, watching, planning. For them, this was the beginning of their holiday. For me, it was the beginning of their lesson. They believed they had conquered me. From the moment their bags spilled across the floors of my villa, from the instant my son-in-law called me old man and barked orders like a tyrant, they thought the battle was over. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't even imagine, was that my plan had been in motion long before their engines roared into the driveway. The moment he made that phone call, with his smug voice crackling through the line, telling me, "We're on our way with 15 people, prepare everything. We'll stay for 3 weeks." I had already begun preparing. Not towels, not food, not slippers, no. I prepared the truth. As I walked through the villa earlier, pacing from one sunlit window to another, my mind had been racing. And while on the outside I seemed calm, inside I was busy weaving the very net they would soon find themselves caught in. The first thing I did was open the hidden drawer in my study. Inside, carefully protected in a leather folder, were the ownership papers of the villa. Every signature, every seal, every legal stamp confirmed that this house was mine. Not theirs, not ours, not family property. Mine. I had worked decades for it. Scrimped, saved, sacrificed. While my son-in-law boasted about get-rich-quick schemes and borrowed money he never repaid, I had quietly built my life brick by brick. And now, every document in that folder proved it. I laid the folder on my desk, smoothed my hand across the papers, and allowed myself a small smile. If they thought they could claim this house, they would first have to erase the truth. And the truth was already locked tighter than they could ever reach. The second step was a phone call. Not to friends, not to family. To my lawyer. His voice was calm, steady, and when I explained the situation, the sudden invasion, the entitlement, the threats implied between every word my son-in-law had spoken, he chuckled softly. "They'll overplay their hand," he said. "Just keep records. I'll be ready." I promised him I would. My phone, resting quietly in my pocket, had already begun recording before the first car even entered the driveway. Every insult, every demand, every order my son-in-law barked was now captured, preserved, waiting. And one day, those words would echo in a courtroom if they had to. The third step was more subtle. The villa had staff, people who respected me, who had worked by my side for years. The gardener who came twice a week, the housekeeper who knew every corner of the home better than I did, and most importantly, a local security team, discreet, professional, loyal. I made a single phone call to them as well. "Not yet," I told them, "but soon. Stay nearby." They understood. And so, as I moved through the house that day, stepping aside while my family trampled across my floors, I carried a secret they couldn't see. The knowledge that everything they did only tightened the noose they were tying around their own necks. My son-in-law strutted through the villa as though he had built it with his own hands. He lounged on the largest sofa, his legs spread wide, his shoes still dusty from the drive, leaving marks on the white fabric. "This place isn't bad," he smirked. "Needs some updates, though. We'll take care of that when we move in." Move in? As though I were already gone. As though I had no say. I kept smiling, my silence unnerving him in ways he didn't dare admit. He snapped his fingers at me like I was a waiter. "Old man, did you hear me? We'll need steaks tonight. Big ones. Don't be cheap." I nodded once. Said nothing. Inside, my satisfaction grew. Every arrogant word he spoke, every command he gave, every insult that rolled from his tongue, it was fuel. Evidence. Proof. He didn't know it, but with every sentence he was building my case against him. Later, when he shouted at one of the children for running too fast through the hallways, I caught the child's eyes. The boy looked at me, hesitant, almost embarrassed. In that fleeting moment, I realized something else. Not all of them wanted to be here. Some were dragged, commanded, forced into this parade of arrogance. That too I stored away. Because sometimes revenge isn't just about breaking the powerful, it's about opening the eyes of those who blindly followed. As the hours stretched on, their demands multiplied. "Where's the champagne?" "Set up the grill outside." "These sheets aren't soft enough." "The Wi-Fi is too slow." Each complaint was delivered with the tone of royalty displeased with their servants. And each time I smiled, because they believed they were draining me, exhausting me, pushing me closer to the edge. But what they didn't know was that they were feeding my strength. Every entitled action was a nail in their own coffin. Every insult was a stone in the wall that would soon surround them. That night, as the ocean roared against the cliffs and the villa hummed with their noise, I slipped quietly into my study once again. I opened the leather folder, ran my fingers across the ownership papers, and whispered to myself, "They think they own me, but they have already lost." The lawyer was ready. The recordings were growing. The staff and security were nearby. The walls were closing in, though they could not yet see them. And oh, how sweet it felt to know what they did not. My son-in-law poured himself a glass of my wine, leaned back in my chair, and said with a sneer, "This house will be ours, old man, whether you like it or not." I smiled, and in the silence that followed, I tasted the victory that was already mine, because my plan was no longer hidden. It was alive, breathing, waiting, and soon it would strike. The villa had never felt so quiet, at least not in the sense that mattered. The storm of voices, the chaos of arrival, the entitled demands, all of it had been a performance. And now, the stage was set for the final act. I watched them from the balcony first. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, indifferent to the events unfolding within my walls. Its waves crashed in rhythm, steady and unwavering, a reminder of the power that belonged to no one but nature, and in a way, to me. They had arrived confident, arrogant, thinking themselves conquerors. 15 people bustling through my home as if it were theirs. My son-in-law striding through rooms like a king in a borrowed crown, barking orders, mocking my age, and asserting dominance over a life he never built. And now they were about to learn how completely wrong they had been. It began subtly. The first moment of hesitation came when my lawyer arrived. Not with shouting or threats, but quietly, methodically, presenting the legal documents that had been carefully prepared over weeks. Every title, every signature, every official stamp of ownership laid bare. This villa was mine. Unequivocally, indisputably, irrefutably. I had instructed him to arrive just as they were settling into the chaos, ensuring maximum impact. Timing, after all, was everything. My son-in-law's eyes widened the moment he saw him. What is this? He stammered, voice faltering. These are the ownership documents, my lawyer said calmly, setting them on the marble table. Every line proves the villa belongs to her. To you, sir, these are just words on paper. But legally, you have no claim here. The smirk that had dominated his face vanished. For a moment, I could see the pride that had always fueled his arrogance crumbling like dry plaster. He opened his mouth, perhaps to argue, to demand, to shout, but the words caught somewhere in his throat. Because arrogance can't survive truth. Meanwhile, the rest of the family began to realize something was amiss. The youngest grandchildren, previously playful and unaware, looked around with uncertainty. The adults, who had laughed at my expense only moments before, now exchanged nervous glances. A few whispered hurriedly to each other, trying to make sense of what had just been revealed. And in that silence, I stepped forward. Calm, poised, my hands folded lightly in front of me. This villa is mine, I said, voice steady and deliberate. Every inch of it. You were invited to visit, not to occupy. You were not asked to rearrange my furniture, insult my home, or command me as if I were your servant. I allowed your presence out of courtesy, not because you earned it. I let the words sink in, letting the weight of truth and authority fill the air. They looked at me then, really looked, for the first time. The woman they had mocked, the old man they had dismissed, was neither powerless nor afraid. She was the owner, the master of her own home, the one who had outsmarted them entirely. My son-in-law tried again, voice trembling with indignation and fear. But we were invited. You can't just... Invited? I interrupted, calm but unyielding. You mean you assumed? You assumed I would let you turn my home into your playground, your hotel. You assumed my patience meant weakness. That assumption was your first mistake. And then the final stroke of the plan unfolded. The staff and local security I had quietly arranged stepped forward. Not in confrontation, not in anger, but as a reminder of the boundaries the family had crossed. Every step, every polite but firm correction reinforced the truth. This villa was mine, and my rules, my authority, would govern it. The look on my son-in-law's face was priceless. His confidence, once so towering, now reduced to disbelief and shame. He flinched as the staff explained the villa's security protocols, the access codes, and the legal protections in place. Every command he had barked moments earlier, "Set up the grill, bring the food, move the kids," had been not just ignored, but legally irrelevant, and the family began to leave. Slowly at first, bewildered, then hurriedly, almost tripping over their own luggage in their desire to escape the truth. I watched from the doorway as they gathered their belongings, muttering excuses, trying to justify their actions. Every whispered apology or defensive comment only served to reinforce their humiliation. One by one, they filed out. 15 people who had arrived with entitlement, arrogance, and pride now shuffled down the driveway, heads low, defeated. The sun had begun to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across my villa. Its golden light painted the walls with warmth, yet there was no warmth left in the family's demeanor. The crash of waves outside matched the rhythm of my own heartbeat. Steady, unshakable, victorious. I turned back into the villa, the air now filled with quiet, furniture untouched by misuse, rooms preserved, and the faint scent of the ocean drifting through open windows. My home remained mine, untouched by arrogance, untainted by entitlement. I walked slowly through the halls, savoring each moment. Every step was deliberate, every breath a reminder of the patience and planning that had brought me here. The satisfaction was not in shouting, not in confrontation, not in rage. It was in the calm, deliberate unfolding of justice. Later, as I poured myself a glass of wine on the balcony, the ocean stretching endlessly before me, I reflected on the events. Arrogance had led them to believe they could intimidate me. Entitlement had convinced them they could command me. Disrespect had blinded them to the truth that power is earned, not assumed. And justice, in its quiet, deliberate way, had unfolded completely. The villa was mine. The authority was mine. The victory, sweet and silent, belonged entirely to me. I leaned back, letting the ocean breeze brush my face, and smiled, not out of cruelty, not out of spite, but out of the deep satisfaction of knowing that fairness, patience, and intelligence always prevail over arrogance, entitlement, and disrespect. My son-in-law would never forget this day. The family would never forget this day. And as the sun disappeared beneath the horizon, I understood something profound. Revenge does not always need to roar. Sometimes it whispers, and in that whisper, it reshapes everything. By the time the driveway was empty and the villa returned to its peaceful state, I knew the lesson had been delivered. Calmly, firmly, completely. This house, my sanctuary, my hard-earned paradise, remained unshaken, untouched, and mine. And the family? Humiliated, humbled, and finally aware of the boundaries they had crossed. I smiled once more, raising my glass to the fading sun. "This is mine," I whispered, "and it always will be." As I stand here in my villa, the ocean stretching endlessly before me, I can finally breathe. The chaos, the noise, the arrogance of those who thought they could take what wasn't theirs. It's all behind me now. And yet the lesson remains vivid in my mind. Revenge doesn't always mean shouting, fighting, or lashing out. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's simply having a plan, carefully, quietly, deliberately, and letting the world unfold exactly as it should. Respect is earned, not demanded, and greed always costs more than it gains. I watched them leave, humbled, frustrated, and finally aware of the boundaries they had crossed. And in that moment, I understood something more. Family, dignity, and self-respect are treasures far greater than any villa, any inheritance, or any material possession. This villa remains mine, yes, but the real victory was in standing tall, staying calm, and proving that power lies not in entitlement, but in wisdom, patience, and integrity. So, if there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. Know your worth, stand firm, and never let anyone make you feel less than you are. Because in the end, life always balances itself, and justice, when delivered quietly and wisely, is far sweeter than anger ever could be.